Hello everyone, thank you for joining us at your Overseas Home webinar today. My name is Jana Korpova-Harris and I will be hosting this session today. We will be discussing how you should prepare for your viewing trip in France, as many of you might be looking at making the next step in your buying journey. It's great to have you all with us today, whether you are here live or catching up on demand. Today's session will be a maximum of 45 minutes. And for those of you who are listening live, you can also ask questions to my guest, Chris Summers from Village Immobilier. If you do wish to ask anything, please type your query into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. If you do need a reminder of anything that was discussed today or want to share this with family or friends, a replay will also be available on the Your Overseas Home section and on demand part of the website, and you can watch this again at your leisure. Today, we are also asking a really quick poll question, which is about your viewing trip plans. So if you could answer it to give Chris and myself a little bit of a perspective as to who is joining us today, so that we can also address some of the potential topics you might be thinking about, depending where you are on this journey to booking your viewing trip. So, Chris, thank you for joining me today. Where are you now? And can you tell us a little bit about you, what you're doing in Village? And then we can start with a couple of questions to kickstart the masterclass about the viewing trip.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Chris Summers. I have been in the real estate industry for 34 years, 31 years in the UK and 3 years now in France. I am based in the Haute-Vienne in a town called Bellac, but I look after about an hour radius from here across the Haute-Vienne into the Charente and a little part of the Vienne. I also act as an area manager type role for Village, where I look after different offices. But ultimately, I'm a self-employed estate agent in France, and I deal with everything from the viewing trip to the dossier to the sale to the currency transfer. I take the clients through everything, and then, of course, coming to France and setting up accounts and everything they need to be in France. So I've got a lot of experience, so hopefully I can answer as many questions as I can for you.
Excellent, thank you. So it's really good to actually have somebody who's actually helping the end customers and the property buyers, especially because buying a property in France is a really big decision for many people. And it often, I make sure that from your experience, I know it often takes not just a couple of months, but sometimes several years to plan it and come to the journey and then actually find the right property. So talking about this kind of a timeline, how far in advance should clients be preparing for their viewing trip? So say, we've got people who are saying, I want to buy a property this year.
Yeah, I think you should start that online search as quick as you can when the thought enters your head to start thinking about France. And once you know the reasons why you're doing it, whether it's a holiday home or full-time home, start that search online. Look at the areas, the locations, the type of properties in those areas, and get an idea of what sort of thing you might be able to find. I think with regards to planning the viewing trip, once you've got a trip booked, I think if you can, a lot of people contact the agent sometimes 2 or 3 months in advance about properties they'd like to view. Now, whilst I appreciate that it's a really exciting journey and I've been there myself, so I know what it feels like, but 2 or 3 months notice, obviously some of those properties will sell, won't be available when you come out. So keep those properties in mind, draw up your shortlist, and ideally probably contacting the agent. I'll suggest you do that about probably 2 to 3 weeks before you're physically due to be here, because then the properties will be fresher. We'll know which ones are available. A lot of them won't be sold. They'll still be available for you to see. And we need 2 or 3 weeks notice to plan those trips with the sellers, because agents' diaries tend to book up pretty quick, and they're often booked a week to 10 days in advance. So notice is good, but not too much notice, because you might just end up giving us a list of 15 properties. By the time your 2 weeks comes to before you come here, 10 could be sold. And we don't want to disappoint you. So by all means, look at them. Probably about a month before, send us the reference numbers of those properties. We'll send the agent the numbers of those properties, and they can send you a full brochure about them, which can help whether you want to view them or not.
Excellent. And so they can be in contact with you before that, would you say? Yeah,
email us about the properties you want to see, and we can send you a full brochure and the location details of those properties if you're able to do that. And that will give you a better idea of room sizes, everything you need to know about the property. And then that might trim your list down a bit. When you get the full brochure, you might think, well, actually, that one's not for us. So it might bring your list down a little bit. But contact us 4 to 5 weeks in advance, get the brochure, but contact us about the viewings probably about 2 weeks before you're due to arrive.
Fantastic. I mean, we've got a couple of questions being asked, but before I get to them, thinking about, okay, I have booked a flight, I have arranged everything. Often people kind of combine it with a little short break as well. So I think this upcoming period of Easter, May bank holiday, and early summer will be quite busy for somebody like you. But what can I expect when I meet you on a day? You know, what's the experience like? Because we all watch the TV programs, and I think they give us a little synopsis of what we want to see almost. But in reality, what would you say is a typical trip with yourself?
Well, an ideal day, you'll likely meet the agent at their office. You'll have the trips planned. It's not always easy. Everyone wants to see a lot of properties quickly, but France is very spaced out. It's a very sparse country, and you could have a 45-minute drive between viewings. But in an ideal world, you'll be coming to the office. You'll meet with the agent you've chosen to see. You'll have the ones listed you want to view. By that point, they should be booked in the diary. And then it's a case of the agent will plan the viewing trip in the best route possible, so it works along the map and we're not diverting all over the place and going back and forth. And it might be a 2-day visit, and we'll have that route planned out. We'll visit the properties one by one. You'll have the brochure for each one as we go round, and we'll see each one and discuss them after each one we go round. And at the end of the day, we'll have a bit of a mop-up in the office or somewhere near your car where we finish and talk about the day and the pros and cons of each house. You might want to say, well, I want to see another one again. So you might want to book a second viewing for that one while you're here, and we can arrange that. But I think we don't need to be disappointed. So it's important that we show you every part of the house and we take you through every one. Some you will like, some you won't. But the day is pretty full. So come prepared to be busy. Fair bit of driving. You might be with the agent or you might be in your own car following that agent. But there is quite a bit of driving involved because some houses can be quite a way apart. But it's an active day and it's a fun day. You're getting to see the houses you've dreamed about viewing and seeing. And it's our job to show you those in the best way we can. The locations, the great things about them, not so good things about them. So you've got the full picture to decide which ones you'd like to see again and go and have another look at.
So that's and also just a practical question. When you showing properties, are owners in the properties or are they actually vacated? It's just an
probably 50-50. If it's a holiday home from a UK owner, they may not be there. Obviously in France, unlike other countries, we accompany every viewing. So we have to go to every viewing. We don't just send them to the house like often happens in the UK and places like that. But yeah, I think it's 50-50. Some sellers don't want to be there, so they'll go out when we arrive or they'll open the door for us and then they'll leave. But a lot of our properties we have keys for. So if the seller's not there or they're working, we'll have keys. So you're probably going to see 70% of them will be just us and the client, not the seller, I think.
Okay, makes sense. I mean, it's almost like being at the TV show, there is nobody there. But a quick practical questions. Are you open at the weekends? So do you see customers at the weekends?
Yeah, weekends is obviously popular because a lot of people fly in on a Friday. We'll view over the weekend and go back on the Monday. So if you want to be viewing at a weekend, you need to try and book that, get those booked in a good 2 or 3 weeks beforehand so we can make sure the weekends are popular. So the sooner we know about them, the better we can get them booked in. Because we are reliant on, if the seller's there, we are reliant on the seller being there as well, being able to let us in if we haven't got a key for it. So there's a lot of things to sort out for that sort of trip.
Next set of questions I have, and then there is quite a few questions from our listeners, are relating to property prices. Of course, everyone is always interested in how is the market doing, and is there a buyer's market, is there a seller's market? So what is it currently in France, Chris? Perhaps not the whole France, but where you're based?
Yeah, well, I'm based. It's very much a busy market with buyers. Probably properties are selling far quicker than they've ever sold before. There's probably not enough properties coming on to meet those demand of the buyers. Buyer inquiry levels are at record highs. The last 6 months, probably 12 months, we've seen record buyer inquiries. But yeah, it's incredibly busy. Whether prices are on the up or not, I think France is still catching up. It's very different France compared to a lot of countries, but it is very, very active and very, very busy. So move as quick as you can to get out here and have a look at a property.
And you touched upon, you know, there is more buyers than properties, so the inventory in France is quite hard to get by.
Yeah, I think because up until 2 years ago, France was the market was a little bit slow, but in the last 18 months particularly, it's moved on really, really quickly, and that's meant properties that may have been on the market for a couple of years have been sold. There's still a lot coming on, but probably not enough new ones coming on to meet the level of inquiries. So it has become probably a bit more of a seller's market because the demand is so high and there's not enough stock. But there is enough there to meet the buyers we're getting, but you could always do with more to show people, to give them more choice.
Of course. And one more practical question about the viewing. I think our audience are quite trying to plan in their heads how the day could look like. How many homes would you expect to see on an average day? I appreciate the distances probably dictate a lot of it, but within fairly good distances.
Yeah, I would say viewing more than 5 a day is probably difficult because it's hard to take them all in and to do it properly and have a good time at the property. 5 a day, if we started at 10 o'clock and finished at 4:30, you're probably going to see 5 in that time and be able to see them properly and have a good look around them.
Excellent. A question about, obviously you mentioned that booking the weekends you must do quite a few weeks in advance because you guys are really busy. It's a busy market. How, obviously you as an estate agent, you cannot physically and possibly show properties to everyone. Is there a minimum amount of funding required, or how are you going to fund your property before you take somebody on the viewing? Because the reason I'm asking, for instance, in the UK, if you want to view a property at the moment, estate agents are only showing it to people who have had an offer or are subject to contract on a property. So is there a condition with you guys?
There isn't a condition. We do ask, if someone makes an offer, we ask for proof of funds or how they're funding the property. And we will ask that question before we go viewing, but we're not asking people to provide those before we take them viewing. Okay. We just ask that you're serious about buying. If you're coming out on a viewing trip, we'd like to think you're serious. And we will take that as a serious buyer. And we'll do our best to help you. And I think during the viewing trip, things change and they think about wanting different things as they see different houses. But as far as we're concerned, if someone's made the effort to come out here and spend a few days viewing houses, they must be interested in buying in France, or why would you take that time?
Okay, excellent. Well, that's good to hear. Well, it's not as brutal as in the UK at the moment,
no,
but they even go into the extent of trying to get you to qualify for a mortgage if you need one on an off-lot property.
I've worked in the UK a long time, so I know how it works. Yeah.
Really, really strange. We have got a question about how do you know when you see a house and has got multiple agents boards on, who is the agent who you should contact, and how does that work? Solo listing or multiple agency listing?
Okay, yeah, we have exclusive listings, which is the sole agency equivalent of the UK, where only one agent will have it, and that's becoming more and more popular in France. Whereas before, the non-exclusive, the multi-agency was more popular. But it's definitely swinging around. I think people like to have one point of contact now as a seller and not have to deal with lots of agents. Who do you view it through? I think it's you contact the one you think shows the property the best, is highlighting it the best, and hope they message you back quickly. If they don't message you back quickly, then you're likely to phone or contact the next agent if there's more than one. I work mainly on exclusive listings because a lot of effort goes into getting them on the market, preparing the videos, and I like to have exclusive listings. But that's not the case with everybody. But I think you'll contact the one that you think showing the house at its best, probably got the most photographs, got the most detail about the house. That's the one I would contact because you know that they're going to know their house really well because they've got lots of information out there about it.
Okay, I've got a few interesting questions. My personal topic, property portals. So I have worked with the property portals for some years now, whether it was Property Guides or Your Overseas Home, and I have got quite a good understanding how they operate. But what do you think? Are property portals up to date in this day and age? Because you did mention properties disappear from the market.
Yeah, I think in the main, yes, they are. I think you'll find the agent's own websites will be more up to date because they're more current, and as soon as an offer is received, they can change quicker on the internal systems. So I think it's quite good when you're looking for agents. The portals are great, but maybe go onto Google and look for immobilier in that town or that area and go direct to the agent's website because that'll be a lot more current, a lot more up to date. But I think once a property's been had an offer received, funds confirmed, and what we call a letter of intent has been signed by the client, the seller and the buyer, that property should then come off the market. I can't talk for every agent, but we Beauvillage will certainly take that off the market once the first stage has been signed by all parties.
Yeah, and the property portal. Do you have a favorite ones for France? I mean, one customer said that they look at Greenacres a lot. I think Greenacres originated from France. And it's a French company based in Paris. I have visited them a couple of years ago. Really lovely bunch of people. But any other? I mean, we have got on the property guides, we've got our own properties as well. But do you have any others that you would recommend our viewers look at?
Most of our UK clients seem to use Rightmove overseas, Zoopla overseas. Greenacres is, like you say, it's one of the main ones, Greenacres. But as I say, I think it's very good to find the agents in the areas and visit their own sites. I think you'll get a bit more detail that way. But as soon as you put properties in France or properties in the OVN, you'll get the top 5 most visited portals come up anyway. So they're the ones to home in on. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I have got a question on how many viewing trips on average does it take people to find the right property?
One, I would say.
Okay.
And I think if their search criteria is correct and they're not looking in, a lot of people come to France and look in a massive territory area. They can look 200 kilometers, 4 different departments. If you do that, you're not going to find something that quick, because it's impossible to find a house when you're looking in such an area, because the choice will be massive. If you can home in on a department or an area or a town and 10 kilometers around it, you've got a much better chance of finding that house. And I think I'm a firm believer that most properties in France are sold by the heart, not the head. Most buyers use their heart buying houses in France, not the head. But it's great because you want to buy through the heart as well. So, but I think it's you can definitely do it in the first trip. As long as you get your search narrowed down and don't look too wide, you should find in the first trip.
I think what I learned from working with lots of estate agents and buyers is that preparation is quite key. You have highlighted it at the beginning, saying, you can start looking a few months in advance, start to shortlist what you want, what are your must-haves, what you can negotiate on as well, and then present you with more specific list with the realistic budget as well. I think that's really, really important. Talking about budgets, we have a question about negotiation. We will be doing another workshop on negotiation with Beauvillage, because I think it is a really important point to discuss. And I'm sure, but at the end of the day, when people saw houses with you, they will sit down and they will start thinking about, okay, we like this, but what happens then? Are people negotiating? Because we are so used to seeing it on TV, where the presenter just basically calls and pretends that there was a negotiation done. But what about real life?
I think with the market as it is now, most people are coming in fairly close to the asking price, because the market's busy, and if it's a nice house in a good area and they don't, someone else will. So historically, people have come in quite low on properties in France. They've kind of tried a lower offer, but it's definitely not the case so much now. I think the only advice I can give, if it's the house for you and you really love that house and you're emotionally bought in, mentally you love it, don't lose it over 3,000 or 4,000 euro. Offer what you think it's worth to you. If it's the house you want, don't lose it over a few thousand euro. If it's the one you want, then pay what you think it's worth and get the deal done. Because if you don't, and the way the market is, someone else will.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It is a very topical question. We get asked that quite a lot. I have another question, which is relating to I made an offer, but I have to fly away. I have to go home because, as we said, these trips are quite limited on time. Do you now use an electronic way to sign the paperwork, make an offer? Is that possible and available to your customers?
Yeah, 100%. I think it happens all the time, and even more so since lockdown started and people were doing more things remotely. You can view a house on the Sunday, you make the offer, we can get it agreed, and pretty much everything can then be done right to the final day of signing, and getting your keys can be done remotely, electronically. You don't need to, if you want to come back for the sign-ins or the other bits and pieces, that's great, but it can pretty much all be done from the minute you leave France. Everything else can be done remotely pretty much.
Excellent. There is one question of somebody that's actually going in a couple of weeks' time. different houses, different costs to run them. How do you quickly make a comparison? Does it come in your pack, or is that something you are aware of, or you help customers to determine this?
Yeah, obviously we're not specialists in energy and things like that and the efficiency of the house, but obviously most houses will have a diagnostic report, which you can have access to, which will give you a DPE, which is the energy report in France, which will show you how the house is energy efficient and what the running cost of the house might be. But obviously, so that's a good thing to look at, but obviously it depends on how old the house is, what kind of heating it's got, what the systems are like. But you know, a lot of houses in France are stone houses, but you know, they'll all be done to different levels. Where it's massively different to the UK is that every house you see will be totally 100% different. In the UK, you can see a lot of similar houses, but in the UK, they're all very, very different. In France, they're massively different. Every one will be different to the last one. But look at the diagnostics if you can. Ask the agent for the diagnostics. If you're interested in it, have a look at the diagnostics, and that will give you an awful lot of information about the house.
Okay, excellent. It's a very interesting point, because you know, you have to take this into consideration.
Yeah.
If you're going to live in it in the near future, and you've got obviously a monthly expenditure. So thinking about surveys, again, we know that in France it's very different. Surveys happen quite quickly here in France. You've got septic tanks, etc., etc. How does that journey look like in terms of, I've made an offer got accepted?
Yeah.
Great. What happens then?
Once your offer is accepted, you'll be asked to provide proof of funding, whether that's a mortgage or cash funding. We'll have to have that proof before we can take the house off the market. We then ask you to the seller and the buyer will sign what's called an LOI, a letter of intent. That is a very simple form that says the seller wants to sell, the buyer wants to buy, this is the price agreed, any conditions that are in that deal, and both parties sign that. When that is signed, the diagnostics will be completed. If they're not completed, they'll be done, but they should be done by then. The client will be given those. They cover electrics, lead, asbestos, and the energy efficiency of the house. So they'll get those reports. They can have those. If it's a FOSS,
is it from surveyor? Sorry, Chris. Is it a surveyor who does this?
It's a kind of surveyor. It's a different type. They're not structural people. They're mainly qualified to look at the things they're looking at. Electrics, because a lot of old houses might have asbestos, might have lead, and the energy efficiency. They're not there to tell you what the roof might be like, what the structure of the house is. These are reports on the fundamentals of the house, but they're not surveys. Surveys are very rarely done in France.
Would you advise the customers to get extra surveys done? And is it easy to arrange, is the question?
It can be arranged. It may sound weird, but 95% of people don't have a survey done in France. The houses are very old, most of them. A lot of them are 100, 2 years old, 200 years old. They've been there a long time. They've had renovations done on them. They might have had the roof done. They've had lots of things sorted out in them, electrics, and been renovated. But because most people buy cash, a lot of people, well, majority of people buy cash in France. So there's no legal requirement to have a survey. If you buy them with a mortgage, you would have to have one. So 95% of people don't have a survey. They have the diagnostic reports and they go through those. We organise a FOSS report, which takes a couple of weeks to get once the letter of intent is signed. When the FOSS report comes back, it'll either be conforming or not conforming. If it's not conforming, we'll try and find out what's wrong with it and get an estimate to make it right. But all of these things are very transparent. All these things are sent to you, they're discussed, they're spoken about, and if we have to renegotiate anything, we'll then do that during that period. But the reports are very transparent, and in some ways it's better for the UK because you get those reports before you make an offer. The diagnostic you can have before you make an offer, whereas in UK you'll have to buy it and then have a survey done and then make a decision. But it's a bit different in France. You can get most of the reports before you make an offer.
Fantastic. Well, so if the survey was done after the kind of the offer was made, will this fixing need to be done before completion? So no. If you find something, say asbestos needs to be removed.
Not normally. The diagnostics, whilst they're a formal document, they are only guidance and recommendations. They're not legal requirements. They're not saying you have to do them. If it's got lead in the paint in the windows or some asbestos on a outbuilding roof, they're not saying you've got to remove it. They're just pointing out that it's there, and it's up to you what you do about it afterwards. But sometimes they might say, well, that work needs to be done. But if it's agreed, the seller will do the work. It might be done between compromise and final act signing, and it might be part of the compromise that's going to be done. But often the buyer will take up the work once they're in the property. It's not too often the seller gets that work done. It's normally the house. If the house needs bits and pieces doing, it would be priced accordingly.
Okay, understood. That's really important that it will be priced in. Sorry, I lost you for a minute there, but it's really important to know that it might be priced in if the work needs doing. I have got a question about how much deposit does one need to take the property off the market or make an offer?
Okay, no deposit required to make an offer. You have to confirm funding and how you're doing that. The first deposit is paid 10 days after the calling off period of a compromise signing. So when you sign a compromise, which is the first stage of the official process, and that's anything from 4 to 6 weeks from the day you make an offer. Once you sign the compromise, the buyer has a 10-day calling off period to decide that once they sign, they have 10 days to decide if they still want to buy it. By day 10, if they do, they then have to lodge a 10% deposit with the notaire at that stage. And after that stage, they are committed. If they withdraw after that stage, they could lose that 10% deposit.
Okay. There was also a question about how you pay for this deposit, but I know that you guys and you, Chris, mentioned that you look after the, making sure that the money gets there. So the wiring or the currency transfer. Yeah. We've got a workshop on how to do it as well on the currency side, but there are lots of currency exchange providers out there. I know you guys recommend Smart Currency. It's a very similar choice for us, but you can choose a bank or you can choose a currency specialist. It's up to you, but the currency specialist has got some advantages where they can, after the cooling off period and the deposit's gone in, they can actually help you secure the whole property value in euros, which is what we know banks won't do at this day and age. So the wiring is actually the easiest part nowadays. Sounds like finding the house and negotiation is probably the most difficult one.
Yeah, the currency people are great. We do use Smart Currency, and where they're great, they can secure. You can pay them to secure a rate for you. So if the euro exchange rate goes really good, you can transfer money. You can secure a rate and pay them that money, and they'll hold that money for you. And it's much easier to transfer money between a company like Smart Currency and the notaire than it is your bank. And there's no charges with the currency provider either. They don't charge for the service either, whereas a bank might charge.
And the money goes to notaire's secured account. So that's very clear. It does not go to Large bank account.
Agents do not take any deposits. They don't get involved in the financial transfer at all. It all goes straight to the notaire in protected accounts.
I've got a very specific question for you, which is actually, I think, quite topical because of Brexit. Are people putting a subject to getting visa granted into their office?
No, legally the notaire wouldn't let you do that. You couldn't put that as a reason as part of the compromise, or you couldn't have a clause suspensive, as it's called in the compromise for that. Obviously, it is a bit tougher now if you're coming full time, but you'd have to. We're not visa experts, but we can put you in touch with them as part of the process who can help you do it and advise you on it. But most of the people that are coming out full time will apply for the 12-month visa, the visitor's visa. And while they're here, they'll apply for the carte séjour and the right to stay after that. But if you're coming here full time, you do need to start the process, if you're planning to, of applying for that 12-month visitor visa as quickly as possible, even before you start viewing. If you think you are going to be out here in the next 3 or 4 months, you need to start the process, because the application process can take 3 to 4 months. It doesn't always, but it can do. Sometimes it's a month. But start the visa application as quick as you can, because the process can be quite lengthy.
So 12-month visitor visa, I suspect you don't need a French address for that, because it's a visitor visa.
Yeah, that's right. It gives you the right to stay here for 12 months and for whatever you're doing in that 12 months. But that 12 months gives you the chance then to apply for your full residency, for your 5-year card, which allows you to stay. But you have time to do that under a visitor's visa. Lost you there, Jane, I think.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. You're back. Oh, no, we've lost you altogether now. Bear with us. Jane will be back in a second.
Here I am. Sorry, apologies for that. My connection just dropped. Right, I have a question about you mentioned the mortgages. I was speaking just recently to somebody about French mortgages that are really hard to get by at the moment, and the loan to value is changing. But if you manage to get a mortgage, who arranges the survey you mentioned? Is it a bank?
We're not mortgage specialists, because it's a very specific market. But yeah, if there's a survey to be done, it would be arranged via the bank, and obviously it will come via the agent to organise. but it will be arranged by the, sometimes they do surveys, sometimes they don't, depends on the lending amount. But obviously, if they do, it will be arranged by the bank, via the agent to sort out with the seller.
Okay, fantastic. I've got, I mean, we had loads of questions. I think I had also my questions I've written for us today. We did ask about the negotiation, offer below asking price. You said the closer you get, the more likely you get your offer accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, I mean, there's a question that might be a cultural question that I've seen in our question tab. Are the French sellers similar to the UK vendors or sellers, or what's their attitude? Are they, how are they behaving when they put a property on the market? Because if it's their family home, how are they behaving towards the international buyer? Is that
No, basically they're putting that house on the market for a reason, and they want to sell it. So I don't think there's any difference who they'd like to buy it. They want to sell their house for the best price possible in the shortest time, which is what any seller looks to do, and that's what we'll try and do for them. I've never experienced anybody wanting to sell their house, to a particular with like a French family to buy it or a UK family. I've never seen any evidence of that. I think ultimately they're accepting of anybody buying their house, as long as the price is right and the buyer's in a position to move.
And from the seller's point of view, so if so happens that the buyer cannot complete, what are their rights to terminate and go with a different buyer? For instance, if the buyer can't get the funds.
What, the seller, you mean? If the seller wants to terminate?
Yeah, if the seller wants to terminate, yes. Yeah,
well, obviously, when the compromise is signed, the 10-day calling off period comes in for the buyer, but the seller doesn't have the same right. The seller doesn't have a 10-day calling off period. But if there's a mortgage involved or there's some kind of funding involved, the final act of the compromise will be subject to the mortgage. So if there's a clause suspensive in for the mortgage because the buyer's getting a mortgage, if the mortgage didn't happen and the sale collapsed because they couldn't get the mortgage in the end, they would be able to withdraw from the property because it comes under the clause they've had inserted in the contract.
Okay, great. Probably a question related to my internet coverage because I dropped from the line, but how good is the coverage in rural France?
Yeah, it's getting better because fibre is now, we're probably many years behind lots of people, but fibre is now growing fast into the hamlets, into the smaller villages. Orange are very hot on fibre, getting into the towns and the villages. So it's getting better and better. Weirdly, I often get a much better 4G signal where I live, which is, in a smaller town, and sometimes the 4G for me is much better than it was in the UK. It does vary, but as it does in the UK, if you go into the middle of the country in the UK, you might have a not as good signal, but it's getting better and better. And there's also a lot of companies now that can provide a 4G booster or an internet booster which goes on the roof, and it boosts your reception. So it's there's a lot of properties in rural France who have people working from home, so that they must manage in a reasonable way. But it's getting better and better,
I would say, because some people are moving, but they are still going to be working and working remotely from wherever in the world they want to be. I have.
We can tell you more than that before you view the house. When we're at the house, we can discuss that with the seller. Look at what they do. We can have that conversation when we're at the house.
Great. I was going to ask you a question which not many agents like me asking. What are the three questions that your buyers should ask you at the viewing when they are in the property that they often forget, and then you sit down with them in the afternoon, say after the trip, and they go, oh, we should have asked that, or we should have found out that?
We should team you up.
Put you on the spot there, I'm sorry.
It's difficult because everybody's questions are different. It depends on the house, where it is, and most people will ask us, will they take an offer? That's what most people will ask us. Will they negotiate? I think it's really hard to say what three questions they'd ask, because I think if you sat down with 10 people, you'd probably get 10 different questions. But I think the facilities is one. What's the nearest facilities?
Yeah.
The airport, train station, the travelling. How quick is it to the airport? Schools, shops. So facilities is a strong one. The airport is very popular. How far is it? Because people, don't really want a long drive when they land or when they come off the other side. But they're very rare. But how far facilities, will they negotiate, and how far is the airport or the train station are probably three of the key ones.
My personal one would be, how close is the nearest shop, and how when is it opened, because if you forget something, you don't want to drive for an hour to get to the nearest cafe or whatever.
That all comes under facilities. Facilities, your shops, your pharmacies, your doctors, your hospital, your banks, all the daily things you need to live your life.
Yeah.
You need to know, you might have some small, you might be in a hamlet that's got a little local shop 5 kilometers away, but then where's the nearest big town with everything you need, and the restaurants and your social life. And so just no question's a silly question when you're buying in France. Just write your questions down and talk to your agent with them. No question is a silly one. So we're very open. We'll answer them as best we can.
I was going to say that, I mean, one of the very good tools we offer at the Your Overseas Home and Property Guide is a viewing trip guide, which has got several checklists when you view the property, so that you don't forget, because often we get taken by the property and get emotional, as you said, buy with a heart and head, and then we just forget, and then we come home and we say, oh, I wish I looked at this. So really important to have your questions and a checklist. So I have got one more question, and then can we do a wrap up as a key takeaways from today with you, Chris? If you were to buy a property near the river, is there a way of finding if they've been subject to flooding or is in a flood zone like you do in the UK?
Yeah, that'll all be part of the reports and the notaires report. That'll all be stated to you before you sign on the dotted line. Excellent.
Thank you very much for all the questions. They were really, really fantastic. Chris, you were really great in giving us the real insights from an estate agent's point of view, which is really important. And the key takeaways from you is preparation, knowing what you want to buy, have a list of questions, and don't be afraid to get on that plane to view.
Yeah, try and look in as smaller areas as you can. Don't look over too vast an area, because it's very hard to find a house, because you'll be viewing for 5 or 6 viewing trips if you're looking at such a vast area. Do your research on where you want to be in France and home in on that area. It's much easier, much quicker to find a property, and the one you're going to end up really wanting, if you just do the research on the areas of where you think you want to be in France. It will make your life easier and the agent's life a lot easier.
Great. We will send Chris's details around after the recording and this masterclass today. I'm really, really thankful for your time. Thank you very much for this 30-40 minutes that we spent together. I have learned a lot. I hope our viewers have learned as well handy tips on how to make the most out of their viewing trips. If they contact you, I'm sure you'll be happy to help.
Yeah, we'll get a reply to you the same day if you contact us. No problem at all.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Take care.